Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this week's segment of our COVID for Youth moment. Still want to express to you that I hope you're all very safe and healthy. Hope everything is going well with you. And I want you to know your church family really does miss you quite a bit. And you probably heard from your parents, read the emails, that the Healthy Church team here is looking at hoping to get back to doing some form of worship by September the 6th. But also, as I said in that email, that's still very up in the air as we wait and see what kind of restrictions the bishop has in place by then. But I do want you to know we want to get back together. We want our church family back together to worship. But we also want everybody to be comfortable and everybody to be safe. And so it'll come. But it'll come at a time when we know that we as a congregation feel comfortable and we're not putting anybody at risk in this process. You know, I've told you a couple times in these segments that I just don't like watching the news anymore. And mostly it's because it seems like unless it's bad news, they don't want to report it. And I'm not really trying to be critical, it's just a huge shift in what you hear in the nightly news from what it was when I was growing up. And it also seems that right now we don't have any better grasp on this coronavirus thing than we did when this thing began back in February and March. And I really don't say that to be critical or negative, and I don't want to be critical because the truth is we're in uncharted waters here. We've never had to go through something like this. There are a lot of unknown answers in this whole pandemic. And yes, you would like to think that our country has such smart people that we can put a man on the moon, or we can build an international space system out in the middle of nowhere in space, that surely we could come up with the answers to this coronavirus. But it's just not that simple when you're dealing with an organism that just keeps growing exponentially over and over. And so we do have experts at work, but even those experts will say, this is my educated guess. And the truth is, it's educated, but it's still a guess. So the best thing that we can do is take care of ourselves individually and our own families. Yes, wear the mask. I don't like it. If you're probably like me, I get out of the car and I'm headed into the store and then it dawns on me I don't have my mask. Okay? It happens all the time. And sometimes I realize if I don't have the mask on, it might be making other people uncomfortable. So I do find it responsible on my part not to make other people uncomfortable, I guess you would say. If I want to take the risk, that's up to me. But I don't be making people feel like they're at risk because of me. So take the precautions. Do what it is that they're telling you to do, but realize it's just a guess. But there's still good precautions and there's still things that we can do to protect ourselves and hopefully move out of this pandemic. But seeing all the confusion and everything that's going on, it's one more reason that we can rejoice and knowing that God's in control of this thing. So during these times, we rejoice that there is a God. And we know that He's got a plan and a purpose in all of this. This took us all by surprise, but it didn't take Him by surprise. He saw it coming long before we ever did. So we just trust God to get us through this time. Now, in today's segment, I want to talk about the personal relationship that we have with God. And by personal relationship, I'm not really talking about the one-on-one relationship with God, though that's essential and that's an important part of our relationship with God, but it's how God interacts with us individually on a very personal level. Yes, we're all made in the image of God. We know that we are created in His image, but yet we all have different personalities. We all have different likes and maybe even dislikes. We all have different ways of learning. We all have different interests, different hobbies, different things that inspire us. We're created in His image, but yet we're all so vastly different from one another. And God created us with all of those differences. And I believe it is through those differences and those individual traits that we have, that's where God works with us and through us on that very personal level. Things that are personal to us that may not mean anything to someone else. It may be different from someone else. And it doesn't mean that our ways is better than their ways, because we're talking about individuals and how God relates to individuals. An example from Scripture, Moses is the only one that ever had a burning bush experience. So if we all just went out every day looking for a burning bush, we're not going to find it. That was something very unique between God and Moses. I'm glad Moses had that experience. That's how God chose to reveal himself to Moses in that particular time and in that particular situation. But don't just go looking for God in the burning bush. The Apostle Paul is the only one in the Bible who has this Damascus Road experience, this blinding light that he just can't see, and he hears this voice speaking to him. That was unique to Paul. But if we go walking down the street waiting for a light to hit us in the eyes, it's going to be a pretty long walk, okay? You're going to make up a lot of time if that's what you're waiting for. But God finds the ways to interact with us individually, and he knows how to do that. Why? Because that's the way he created us. To get to know us how we are, where we are, and for us to get to know him. Now, Jesus actually drove this point home with his disciples. There was a time Jesus was just sitting around with his disciples, and he asked them a question. He said, "Who does everybody say that I am?" And by everybody, he's talking about the crowds that have been following him, maybe even the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, just anybody that outside of the disciples. Who does everybody say that I am? And they said, well, some people think you're John the Baptist. And at that time, John the Baptist was still very much strong in the mind of everybody. He was pretty fresh on their minds. Though he'd been in prison, Herod had put him in prison, nobody was hearing anything out of John the Baptist. So they thought maybe Jesus was John the Baptist, or continuing on what John the Baptist had been doing. Some say, well, you're Elijah. And if you remember back in the Old Testament, the story of Elijah doesn't really die. He's just taken up in a whirlwind. And it's a common thought through the Jewish community that Elijah would come back again. And still others say, well, you're just a prophet. You're a great prophet. A lot of people had their own different opinions about who Jesus is. But then Jesus asked them another question. He said, but who do you say that I am? And it's in that encounter that we get that great exclamation from Peter, who says, well, you are the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. What Jesus is trying to teach his disciples there, what he's even teaching us today as his followers, it's good to know what other people say about him, about who he is, about who God is. But what most important is what we say he is, who we say he is, how we connect with him individually. And how we connect with him individually is not something that our parents can discover, our grandparents can discover, our friends or our brothers or sisters. It's something only we can discover. And God chooses to meet us where we are, in the personality and the traits and the likes and the things that we do, because that's how he created us. It's good for you to know what your parents tell you about who Jesus is and how God works and how God has worked in their lives. They're teaching you to find that own part in your individual life and how God works in you and through you. We all have our experiences, and each experience is different. And I said before, it doesn't mean that one experience is better than the other, because each experience is based on the individual. Even the Apostle Paul is dealing with this quite a bit in the letters that he's writing. He often talks about there's many gifts, but there's one Spirit. Or there are many talents or many gifts that we have, But each one is important because those individuals are fulfilling their calling in God based on the qualifications and based on their characteristics that God had given them to do the things that they had to do. It doesn't mean one is more important than the other. It doesn't mean that one is stronger than the other. It's up to us to find our niche with God and how He comes to us and finds us where we are. Now, another example that I like to use, back when I was in college, Minister of Music was a good friend of mine and sort of my mentor. He had this 14-foot catamaran sailboat. And whenever the weather would break, and through the summer sometimes, and in the early fall when we get back to school for the fall semester, he and I were headed out to go sailing on that catamaran sailboat. And there were times the wind was just very steady. It would just catch that sail and that boat's just going across the water. I mean, it just moved. And this is how it moved. I mean, it was just going. It was just going. There were times the wind wasn't blowing. But that was fine. We could just lay there in the sun and the boat's just going up and down. I used to sit there, whether I was going across the water with the wind or just sitting there, laying there, relaxing, thinking to myself, now this is heaven. This is heaven. So many great moments with God just on this sailboat. But then I also remember that may not be the experience for everybody. If someone's afraid of water, if someone can't swim maybe, or if anybody happens to be the least bit seasick or queavish, being out there on that catamaran sailboat would not be heaven to them. They're probably thinking they're going to heaven any time now, or they're probably wishing they were just to get off that boat. It wouldn't be heaven to them, but it was to me, and it was for him too, and it was for others. There are different traits, different ways that we experience God. Another example on the opposite side, I've got a brother who likes to hunt every once in a while. I've got a brother-in-law who hunts and a couple of nephews that like to hunt. And in fact, my brother-in-law, his brother, who I actually graduated high school with, he's an avid hunter. I mean, he's one of these that takes it really serious, got all the latest gizmo and gadgets that you need, doesn't wash his clothes so that it has any type of perfume smell to it or anything. I mean, he takes this stuff seriously. When hunting season rolls around, I mean, he's out way before the crack of dawn, probably 5 o'clock. He's climbing up a tree, going to sit in the tree stand. And hear him talk about that experience, that's just like paradise to him. And he even talks about the times he spends with God sitting here in this tree stand. And I'm so thankful he has those experiences. I'm glad they're very uplifting and moving to him. They wouldn't be to me, okay? And it's not because my way is better than his. We both meet God on our own individual terms and the things that we like to do. At 5 o'clock in the morning, if I happen to be awake, I'm not going to be in a tree stand. I can tell you that. And I can have an encounter with God in my bed between the sheets at 5 a.m. But I'm so glad that he has that his way isn't better than mine, and mine's not better than his. The fact that they're real and that they're encounters with God. Look for the ways in which God interacts with you through your likes, through your interests, through your hobbies, through the things that bring you inspiration, because that's how he created you, and that's how he's going to find you. If God wants to find me at 5 a.m., he knows not to go look for me in a tree stand, because I'm not going to be there. Now, he may find me out on a catamaran sailboat, or he may find me playing the organ, or he may find me doing the things that he knows I love to do, because that's how he created me. Look for those ways in which God comes to find you in the interests and the likes and the hobbies and inspirations that you have, because that's how he created you. Have a good week. We'll see you next time.